So AirDNA is great if you want to see what other average listings are doing, but I know that's not you, right? Because you don't want to be average, you want to be excellent. So do I. Let me get into my beef with AirDNA. AirDNA as a tool to see what other listings are doing might be good. Okay, fair enough. But if you want to do market research and you're using AirDNA for that, this is not a good idea, my friends. AirDNA will show what other listings are doing, but the problem with that is most hosts suck. If you want to be an excellent host, AirDNA will not give you accurate information on what your property could be potentially, or what its full potential is for that matter. I've looked up a couple of different areas on AirDNA, was able to confirm this when comparing against my own portfolio, that I see this as sort of a common thing, especially amongst newer hosts who are not really too familiar with pricing strategy. And what it does is they will use a higher nightly rate, understandably so. But what this does is it will in general tend to drive down their occupancy. And I hear the argument a lot about, well, make the same amount of money and less cleanings, or make the same amount of money or more and half the work. Well, that's not always true. In general, if you're able to drive occupancy at a higher rate, at a lower nightly rate, then you're gonna revenue much more over the course of a month, over the course of the year, whatever it may be. If you're familiar with the concept of contribution margin, you'll know that the more revenue that you can drive to pay down your fixed costs, the more it will drive overall profitability into your company. Basically, if you have a good pricing strategy and you know what you're doing, the pricing of those days and how this affects the pricing of those days falling around the bookings, then you will be able to optimize your calendar to drive the maximum amount of revenue and occupancy that your property is capable of. I just wanted to give a couple of real life examples. We're gonna hop on the computer here in just a sec and we will go over those numbers. All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are going to look at AirDNA. Going to be comparing what AirDNA is putting out compared to some of my own properties in McKinney, Texas. McKinney, Texas, it's a suburb of North Dallas, and it's where I have a few of my properties located. I'm mainly in Northeast Dallas. I have some towards, I guess, like a little bit more west, but this is kind of my stomping grounds here. Now, according to AirDNA, most of these listings are averaging around 54% occupancy. As we can see right here, the occupancy is 54% for the month, which is about 16 days. The average daily rate right here, we're looking at $202 a night. Well, in other words, average nightly rate, which admittedly is a little bit higher than my own nightly rate as of right now here in slow season. But, you know, as we start to approach the warmer months, that number will start to rise. Just based on this right here, 16 days times 202 is going to give you a little over $3,200 a month in monthly revenue. It's not really that good based on what my own houses do. Now, if you're looking at the annual revenue, $40,000 a year for a specific property, any given property really, which is, you know, I guess what the market is doing. If you're a landlord, that's probably not that bad, right? If you're a short-term rental host, that's pretty bad. Okay, so let's look at Airbnb. I'm just gonna bring up my portfolio here just to make a comparison. Insights. Go to the Insights tab. Looking at the occupancy and rates. All right, we're gonna do similar listings. So for the date selected, February 2nd to March 3rd, average occupancy is about 88%. But look at the similar listings in the area. Okay, 15%, and as high as 18%, as low as 15, 14, yeah, 15%, 15 to 18%. Meanwhile, my portfolio is doing 85 to 94%. Yeah, so there's a massive difference in the occupancy rate. Slight difference in the nightly rate, but a huge difference in occupancy. So most hosts right now are suffering. 15% occupancy is quite terrible, right? These guys aren't making any money. But it just goes to show, you know, even in slow season, if you have your pricing strategy on point, then you can drive 90% plus occupancy into your portfolio year round. Okay, the only thing that's going to fluctuate here is going to be the nightly rate. In slow season, it's going to go down, and the warmer months it's going to pick back up. And slow season in Texas, in Dallas, Texas at least, is typically, I would say, like January to about the end of April. Really, April is when the nightly rates start picking back up. Now, if we were to look at the nightly rate, my apartments bring this average down. My houses average a little bit more than this, but let's just look at the McKinney properties since we're in McKinney in AirDNA here. Okay, my McKinney houses, nightly rate 175. McKinney 4 is doing 175, and my other McKinney house, McKinney 3 is doing 127, a little bit lower. This is a 3-bedroom. The other two are 4-bedroom houses, so they're doing a little bit better. 4 or 5-bedroom houses, predictably they will perform better than your 3-bedroom houses. I don't really get anything less than a 3-bedroom house. Ideally, I like the 4 and 5-bedroom houses. They just perform better. Now let's do some math on that. All right, so let's just say we showed 90 to 95% average occupancy. So let's take a look at these McKinney properties. Occupancy rate, show all. So let's go down here to 97% occupancy. That is 29 days out of a month booked. 97% occupancy, right? 94% occupancy. All right, let's just do some math here. 29 days times 175, $5,092 in revenue. Okay, so compare that to what AirDNA was telling us, it's $3,200. So my properties in the same area are doing $1,892 in additional revenue per month versus the competition, which is, it's a good amount of money on a given property. But if you take this number and apply it at scale, like 20 plus properties, kind of like how I'm doing, that's going to be just over 23 properties. That's over $43,000 in additional revenue per month. Okay, so my portfolio right now does probably between $80,000 to $120,000 a month on average, depending on time of the year. But that just gives you an idea of kind of why I think AirDNA is not really a good tool. It's going to give you some numbers based on what the average listing is doing, the average host, and 90% of hosts are they're mediocre at best. A lot of them are not professional hosts. A lot of them just they might have 1 or 2 listings and just kind of do it on the side. But if you're a professional host and you do this the right way, AirDNA is just not a very good tool to use in terms of property acquisition. You're not going to get a good idea of what your property can do if you're just going on AirDNA. And if I were to only use this in the property acquisition phase, I would not have a lot of my properties I have today, just because it doesn't make any sense. From a business perspective, these numbers do not look good. I would not base it, property acquisition on this. Your market best. If you do your homework on, where people like to travel, what are the popular areas, where the major roads are, hospitals, shopping, dining, things like this, property size, all of these factors are going to make a much bigger account into what your property is capable of, especially when it comes to pricing strategy. And just by that, what I mean is knowing what your property can fetch on a nightly rate, on a nightly basis, what it cannot fetch on a nightly basis in both slow season and peak season. Of course, there's going to be a slight difference between your weekdays and your weekends, but knowing these things is going to take a little bit of trial and error. You'll know when your listing goes vacant for several days, and then at what price point is people start booking it, and that's going to kind of be your sweet spot. But also knowing how much to drop those rates based on where reservations fall on the calendar. So if you're not familiar with the term orphan days or adjacent days, then knowing these terms will help you kind of give you a better idea of of how to adjust your prices. Most professional hosts are going to be using some type of dynamic pricing software such as Price Labs, Wheelhouse, Beyond. Doesn't really matter. Whatever pricing software you use. Again, this is just a tool. It will automate it to some extent, but me personally, I still manually adjust my rates on a daily basis. Your best results will come that way. Again, because you know your property better than Price Labs or Beyond or any pricing software knows your properties. You want to get into those tools if you're doing this professionally. And yeah, there you have it. AirDNA, I mean, it is what it is. It's just one reference point for making decisions. I would not rely on this solely for property acquisition because, again, it's not going to give you a good idea of what your property is truly capable of. It's going to take some trial and error, and that's what business is all about, right? It's about taking calculated risks, and sometimes it doesn't always work out, and that's okay because, you know, at least from the experience comes a learning experience. So that way, when you get into it for your next iteration, it just makes you that much better. So anyways, hope that helps. And if you got value out of this video, go ahead and click like and subscribe, and I will see you beautiful people later.